It's Monday, and you know what that means. It's time for Inside LAFC podcast. We are live on LAFC YouTube. We are live on LAFC Facebook. We're seeing the people roll in. We are here for you. I am Max Bretos. There's Benny Feilhaber. Benny, it's not the lead, but we're not going to bury it here. Tough U.S. Open Cup for LAFC 2 as they go down in Lancaster. And tough for the Des Moines Menace. Benny Feilhaber's run in the U.S. Open Cup, I am afraid, has come to a close, so he can focus exclusively on the podcast. What happened, Benny?
I just didn't want to miss any podcasts in the future, so we had to make sure we bowed out gracefully. But really, it was a fun ride for me while it lasted. It was nice playing with my old buddies and teammates and fellow old people. Got to score a goal in front of my family and my kids. And so that was fun, and better luck next time, I guess.
Well, it was bad. And look, if LAFC 2 is not going to make it, all the LAFC 2 peeps are going to be Des Moines Menace fans, and hope for you to get through and give us something to talk about. But
right.
Alas, so we're sad for you, but you got the goal. I wanted to share something with you. As everyone, welcome into the podcast. A reminder: this is your show. Ask questions. I'm telling the Facebook folks ahead of time. I'm expecting multiple questions, quality questions from you, because the YouTube folks always deliver. I know the Facebook folks can do it as well. And a reminder, tell your friends you can watch this podcast on both platforms afterwards once we're off the air. Joe Malfa, who's a very good broadcaster, he might be calling the CONCACAF Champions Cup game on Wednesday, said that a funny story, his wife saw him over his shoulder ordering a Des Moines Menace Benny Feilhaber jersey online. And she said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Yeah, honey, I'm a dork, but I was calling that match against Omaha the other night when he scored what could be his last ever official goal. $60. Figured it was worth it for a unique item."
Smart man. I think there's a very, very likely chance that that's the last goal I'll ever score. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever step field on a professional game again. So smart man. I hope either he enjoys that jersey for the rest of his life, or maybe he can sell it on eBay someday in the future.
It's always about me, Benny. He also added this. He goes, "Then I turned on the 2007 Gold Cup winner and let her hear. She said about my call about your goal for the U.S. team, that's probably one of the best calls you've ever played for me."
I agree. Well done.
Okay, let's get to business. The questions rolling in. Everyone's coming in. Drop your questions and your comments. We'll get to it. We have a huge game on Wednesday. We're going to preview that about Miami, but we do have to start about what happened in Houston. The Houston Dynamo get their first win of the season. 1, LAFC 0. LAFC traveling directly from Houston to Miami, which makes sense. Those two cities, that's about like a 2-hour flight, maybe less. So they're not coming back, and now they're going to get ready. And we know it's the priorities, the CONCACAF Champions Cup. But talking about this game, 8 changes to the lineup, so there was rotation. And while we could say that's the reason they didn't get the result, and we'll look at some of the good things, some of the not good, so good things, I think the big picture, and we were talking about this before we hit the airwaves, is you got to find players that are going to get you results. And right now, when they turn to the guys that aren't in that core, it's not happening.
I think that the biggest thing that we need to talk about is the fact versus the opinion, right? And I think the fact is there's no doubt that I think everybody, including Steve Trundle and the staff, are putting priority on CCC right now, right? You saw the first team playing in the CCC. You saw a bunch of changes against Houston. I think that Steve would say that he was expecting a better performance and a better result in against Houston, a team that, like you said, hadn't won up until that point in time and hadn't really looked very good either. And so I think the fact is that, and I think the opinion is that, from my perspective, the team needs to not only get results when they do sit some players, but the performance is what I was more disappointed with. I know that there's going to be, some hardships when the whole midfield was changed from obviously the 3 that we normally see in there. And there's a lot of aspects to the game that, hamper the ability for players to have that chemistry. Having said that, we played on the back foot for the entire 60 minutes that the starters were really on the field. We had very, very limited opportunities. It was just, kind of random chances off of some counterattacks that kind of went our way, or a break or whatever. It wasn't I have no problem with certain teams that sit a little bit further back and then have a real idea of how they want to win the ball and then break into the attack. It didn't look like LAFC had any of that really in the first 60 minutes. And you also saw the moment that some of the starters came back into the game, obviously down 1-0 at this point in time. So now Houston plays a little bit less aggressive in the attacking areas of the field. You saw some improvement, some better quality chances, some, interaction in the final third. So you see right now that, LAFC quite clearly have a starting 11 with probably 2 or 3 other guys that they can count on. And then after that, it's a lot of question marks. And I think that's the biggest thing that we can take as a negative takeaway, that you need to find the ability to count on certain players outside of the top, 13 or 14.
LAFC have had some guys make that breakthrough. Nathan Ordaz is a great example. This is a guy who put his hand up. Igor Jesus is a guy we didn't know he was going to be this important, but he's put his hand up. They just need more players. The lineup, it was a 4-3-3. Smolyakov, Segura, who's put his hand way up these last few weeks, and Madelon, who put his hand up as well. We'll talk about defending, because the defending's good. And Kosi Tafari, a center back playing it right back. Odin Holm, Adam Saldana, Yaya Boa, Bouanga, Giroud, Martinez. Smolyakov, we've seen some flashes, including that great goal against San Diego, but hasn't really put his hand up. Yaya Boa. And I'm not saying these guys aren't, but you're hoping to see more signs. We didn't see that against Houston. Odin Holm, after a nice debut against San Diego, we didn't see the follow-up that you would like. And Olivier Giroud hasn't done it either. I want to go to some of the questions. Diego mentioning Olivier was open on 2 drives and the cross never came, and was a block shot and the other went over everyone's head. I would add, and I don't think you'd say this to David Martinez, but that great chance that he had on the break where he played it to the near post, Olivier made the run. And if Martinez can get it over on a short cross open, which it was because of his speed, I think Giroud can tap that in and score. But that's part of that, the disconnect that you hope clicks in, but it hasn't.
And if I were to interject there as well, Max, and I don't want to take anything away from the point that you just said, but to me, it's night and day who the starting 9 right now should be for the team, and that's Ordaz. He gives you so many little things, right? And I'm not talking about scoring goals. I know he scored the goal against Inter Miami. I don't know how many goals he's going to score from outside the box with his right foot in that moment, but it's just so many little things. I mean, the run in behind that opens up space in the middle, the connection with the midfield. He's young, he's energetic, he's contagious in a positive way. And look, Giroud is a guy that's at the back end of his career. And again, I always forget the ages. I think he's 37, 38, around that age. Am I right, Max? You always can correct me if I'm wrong. But at the end of the day, yes, he is a French international. He's a World Cup champion, but Father Time, like everybody says, is undefeated. And so at some point there needs to be an understanding from the fans. And I think it already is there from the technical staff, that Giroud is a guy that you need to find moments to put in certain games. He is not going to be your bell cow at number 9, scoring 20 goals a game. I think Ordaz is going to be fighting once Jeremy Ebobisse comes back. I think those are the 2 guys that are going to be fighting for starting spots in that position.
And I don't think that surprises anyone. But in the conversation about putting the hand up, you would like to see Giroud score a goal. So in case you need that, because I think we know he's going to be. And we're going to give you the projected 11 for Miami shortly. And I don't think it's any secret that Nathan Ordaz is going to be there, and Ebobisse is getting back to health. But maybe a healthy Ebobisse doesn't supersede Ordaz the way he is. A few questions coming in. Did you give grades, Benny? They wanted a grade for Jesse for LAFC against Houston.
It's
not a good one, right?
If I'm nice, I'll give it a 4.
What is the kind of grading scale do you have?
4 out of 10. I don't know. 4 out of 10.
Right.
It wasn't pretty. There wasn't too many positives. I thought Marlon was fantastic. I thought he was very good. He was sharp on the entry balls, be able to step and steal balls and try and initiate the counter. I thought he's kind of like an Igor Jesus as a center back, where he's a beast, right? He throws his body around. He gets physical. Eddie was solid as well, played very solid and had our best chance to score. arguably two of our best chances, I think, in the second half. I remember another one at the end. And so, the defense was solid, but that's been the case, right? We've been good defensively for the most part. And the only reason why we have, 3 wins and 4 losses in the season is because we haven't been good or potent at all on the opposite side of the ball in the attacking half in those games. So, I think there's some positives, but as a team, it just isn't balanced the way that Steve Trundle has talked about, that he wants to have the team be balanced, both defensively and offensively. We've seen a lot from the defensive side of it. We haven't seen enough from the offensive side of it.
Questions rolling in. And by the way, some folks just mentioned that they're here. Miakarte Projects, some emojis there with the hands. I don't know what that exactly called, but we encourage you. Just say you're here and say hi. But we love to know that you guys enjoy the show. Christoph saying, let's go. Jay David, who said he's excited. He's a regular here saying he's excited for the show. Mentioning Olivier doesn't fit our style, living on sitting back in transition, needs speed, doesn't have speed. He's 38, to answer your question from earlier. We'll see, because not everything fits perfectly, but some things do. And we'll see. Chanot's still not ready for minutes. I think that's a product of these other defenders. And we're going to talk about the rotation, etc. But Marlon, you said, was the best player, and he's just come back from injury. Eddie Segura is looking like a really all-round defender, and I think you got to give LAFC credit for identifying that. Because at the beginning of the season, people were, Eddie Segura. I am confident in Eddie Segura. He's clean. He hits the ball out of the back. He was a threat in scoring opportunities. I like how he's fiery. He gets with the referee. So for Chanot, I think it's a numbers game. There's a lot of good defenders in front of him.
There's no doubt about it. The defense has got plenty of players right now that are battling for competition. And again, it's a strong point of the team. Who would have thought us talking about this in the beginning of the season, that the defensive 4-5, including Igor Jesus in front of him. I know Hugo Lloris had a couple of, shaky moments in the last week or two, but for all intents and purposes, those back 5 or 6 have been fantastic this season. There's very little to say from a negative standpoint. But again, that's why Chanot hasn't played as much, because he's still coming back, and there's other guys in his place that have played really well. But I'm not too concerned about the defensive aspect of the team. I'm very much more concerned about how do we start creating chances for ourselves, right? And I think that's going to be the toughest part for the staff and Steve. How do we turn defense into offense? Because no problem being a little bit more defense oriented, but you got to find a way to impose yourself in the game and not just rely on, the other team's mistakes to allow you into a game.
We'll talk about that as well. Mia Carte, we mentioned, he followed up because I'm listening because I want to get my knowledge up. You're in the right place. You'll learn a lot from Benny. Benny, he's becoming a media star, by the way. You'll see him more and more. He was there at the Nations League. We'll continue to see more good stuff. As everyone loves what you say, Alan, unfortunate Olivier hasn't played good, but like LAFC won't change their playing style for a big name from Europe. I think that's something that's very positive about LAFC. This is how we play. Players have to adapt. Somebody mentioned, Richard, is there a chance Thomas Mueller comes to LAFC? It looks like he's coming to LAFC. To MLS. I don't know anything about LAFC, but we'll see about the summer. It should be fun. Let's talk about rotation and adjustments. And this is the big picture that we're kind of delving into with regards to who's putting their hand up, because we're at the point, Benny, from what I'm hearing you say, we can't make 8 changes on a regular basis. You've got to go tight to the belt and see the group, whether they continue in Champions Cup or whether they don't, that core group. How have you seen the flesh? What do you think the number is? And are there some people that maybe not in that core group, let's say for that first leg, that you would feel comfortable giving a shift of 15, 30 minutes, perhaps starting?
Well, I'm looking at our lineup for this last Houston game, right? And out of the guys that, we're not talking about, I think, I know David Morales, came out at the end of the Martinez, sorry. Morales is his middle name. I'm looking at SofaScore, but yeah, David Martinez.
Busted.
He came out, and I don't know how he is, but obviously he's a guy that we can count on. Olivier Giroud is a guy that, we talk about can we count on him in the late minutes to maybe bring something in, set pieces, that kind of thing? But we haven't seen it yet. Obviously, Denny Bouanga, but the midfield three, Holm, Yeboah, Saldana, I don't think you can necessarily say we can count on any of these guys for big minutes yet, right?
Yeah.
We've seen
Keyword
pockets,
yet.
we've seen pockets of all three of those guys playing okay, but together we didn't see anything, that we were excited about. Smolyakov, we've seen moments as well. I think Eddie and Marla in the middle were excellent, and I think Nico Tafara has shown as well, from a defensive perspective, that he can do things. And so, again, you see the depth is more on the backside, right? The back four, the back five, or whatnot. And the curiosity is which guys are going to kind of, jump into either the starting 11 or guys that we can count on off the bench to really not only provide minutes in those games like the Inter Miami game, but if we're continuing in CONCACAF Champions Cup, in those games now that, sandwich those CONCACAF Champions Cup games so that we can, rest some of those guys in those MLS games and still pick up points. And so I don't know what the answer to that yet. I think that we are a little bit short in depth right now from that perspective with that question that you asked about which guys we can count on. And I think this game is a perfect example because we had a lot of rotation. We didn't have a good performance. And when the adjustments throughout the game came in terms of personnel, more of the first team guys, you immediately saw a different team, right? And again, we saw a different team. We were down 1-0. Houston's up 1-0. They're protecting a 1-goal lead, which they haven't won a game in the season. So they're going to play a little bit differently. So we saw, LAFC be a little bit more proactive in those last 20, 30 minutes, which was positive. But it was all first teamers for the most part at that point.
We continue to encourage you to ask questions on YouTube and Facebook. We are live. It's amazing. This may be our best feedback to date. We're just getting started on the show. Someone asked about you taking over Sporting. He's busy. Relax. Teams have got to relax. There was a question. I was going to ask it really quickly about comparing Adam Saldana and Eric Duenas. Duenas is now with Houston. Saldana, I think they're seeing him as the backup clearly to Igor Jesus, a pure number 6. Duenas could play a couple positions, more the 8, I think. And fill some gaps there, but he was a tough guy, could win some ball as well. But I think Saldana is more a traditional 6. I think that's pretty. I
would agree. Yeah, Saldana, you can see a little bit more of a pit bull. Duenas is a little bit more, like you said, an 8 is the exact position that I see him as well. Clean on the ball, shifty in little, phone booth spaces, whatnot, to create kind of the outlet. I would say that he is, Duenas could become a Mark Delgado kind of. Somebody like that where, stays in the league for a long period of time, understands the league, is smart. Mark Delgado not only does the things with the ball from building out from the defensive to create the attacking, movement into the final third, but he's also, tough on defense. And I think Duenas is more like that, whereas Saldana is the 6, like you said.
I'm going to ask you a very difficult question here, but let's go over some of these other comments that have rolled in. Somebody mentioned about the drainage at Shell Energy Stadium. Remember, this game was delayed 45 minutes, and that I looked at the field. I go, they're not playing. So hats off to the folks in Houston. And I think one thing we know about Houston, they're used to big storms, and they have great irrigation. They did on the same. I mean,
they're also used to big delays. I feel like every other game I played there, we had an hour and a half delay. So anytime 7:30 is the kickoff, we're starting the game by 9.
And remember in 2018 when they came to LA and we hadn't had rain for 8 months, and then we had this storm from the Mount Olympus come in.
We went down that game as well. That rain delay helped us reboot, and then we won the game 4-2, if I remember correctly.
I know. So Houston's coming up on the schedule soon. So get your umbrellas ready. It's just never know. Micah mentioned, and the next thing I want to ask you is about creating offense. And that's a scary thing because LAFC just haven't done it. Micah saying Ordaz should start. He's been better than most forwards in MLS. I think in 2 years or less, he will be DP quality. He's been remarkable. And that's a guy I think that fits this creating offense. Steve Chirinolo, after the game, said we sat a little too deep, didn't allow us to get in the game, didn't get the counter. And even before the changes were made, like from halftime, I thought there were some decent moments in the first half. Halftime until the subs came in, they didn't touch the ball. And it was like, is that it?
I mean, I agree. I agree with everything that Steve said in the press conference. It was too deep. And again, I have no problem with a team that sits deeper, right? Especially with personnel issues and whatnot. But you got to have an idea. At the end of the day, the point of the game is to win. You got to score, right? I've always told this to my players. You know, at SKC too. I coached there for the last 3 years, and the players are not at the quality that the MLS guys are. And I still said the same thing to them. Where look, at the end of the day, you're up 1-0, you're up 2-0, you're up 3-0. You're still trying to score. You might be defending a little deeper, but it's to open up space, to create opportunity for when you win the ball. Now, where are the runs coming from? Connect the pass, break the lines. Now find the right play in behind. And I think that's the one thing that I was left wanting more of from LAFC is that no problem. We're a good defensive team. Let's play to our strengths, sit back a little bit, absorb pressure. And then when you win the ball, you got to be in really good pockets. You got to have the wherewithal and the confidence to try and play out. And then 1, 2, 3 passes is usually all you need to break that initial repress from Houston. And now it's Denny Bouanga making the run, David Martinez making the run. And we just barely saw any of that in the first 60 minutes. And obviously I agree in the 15 in the second half, it was almost zero, where we saw a couple of moments. I found it to be a little bit random, the moments that came in the first half, but at least we saw a couple of those, but just not enough.
Did you see it in the game against San Diego where they scored 2 goals? Probably should have got another one if not for a red card. Or the Inter Miami game, they scored the goal. Steve said after the game, we should have had more goals, and we saw it. There was an intensity. This, obviously, with the changes, did you see enough in those 2 games in particular, the Sporting game as well, where there's hope with this system? Because they're not going to change the system unless something goes really bad in the next few weeks, I think.
I think that we've seen it in moments of games. I don't think we've seen it again. I think the Sporting Kansas City game was the game that I've seen LAFC, and I know I was alive there, so I got to see the full picture, not the TV picture. But it was the game that I felt that they were the most dangerous, whether in possession or out of possession. I thought they always looked like they wanted to break lines, go through the middle, find the outside overlapping runs. I thought there was more overlapping runs from the outside backs in that game. Hollingshead was on the left. He got up and down in that first half all day. Palencia had a couple of moments as well. I think against Inter Miami, there were some moments. There was definitely a couple of opportunities. I don't think it was like consistently. But again, you're playing Inter Miami, much better team than SKC on that day. So you also have to take that in mind. But I do think that there are moments there. And look, I don't want to harp on the fact that against Sporting, Bouanga wasn't there. But the overlapping runs from outside backs are incredibly difficult when you play with a guy as fast as Denny Bouanga, right? You have Denny Bouanga and David Martinez. It's hard for anybody to get around them. They get the ball 20, 30 yards in front of those guys, and they're sprinting with the ball. And so I find that to be the biggest question mark. What is Steve going to do? Is it just going to be, okay, we're going to play a little bit more counter, create more space, and now let those guys run? Or if we want to build out a little bit more and have a little bit more possession, right? And at times when we're down a goal, we're going to have a little bit more of the ball. Well, how do we utilize those guys with overlapping runs around them to create something for them, right? Denny Bouanga can't dribble 4 guys. I mean, I remember one time on the broadcast with Houston, I forget who it was that was calling it, but said, hey, Denny Bouanga just try to dribble 4 players. And I'm like, he could be the best dribbler in the world. Messi can't dribble 4 guys. Denny Bouanga is not going to be able to very often either. So we got to find different ways to create in the final third.
And Denny Bouanga starting this game, he starts all the games, and they talked about it afterwards. He goes, look, Denny's just so fit and ready to play. And I know you've talked about it for him maybe taking a step back. It's a weird one because maybe you want him in rhythm because he's still coming back from international duty for this. So that's a tough one, right, Benny, to say you're traveling for this game, but you're sitting this one out.
I don't think that's going to happen, at least not very often, unless there's some reason that we're unaware of. I think you have to try and find a way for your team to play the best with your best player on it, right? Denny Bouanga is our best attacking option. You got to find a way to utilize him. So I just go back to the ability. I think the biggest way that you start creating more chances in the final third is by incorporating your outside backs, right? If you play with a 4-back system or a 5-back system with wing backs, You need to find a way to incorporate those guys in overlapping runs, getting down the end line. In the moments that we've seen LAFC look good in the final third, and again, and the one game that I forgot about was the Columbus game at home in CCC where we won 3-0. You find those guys getting in and around the final third, getting crosses off, getting in the box. When we only have one guy trying to dribble, 2 or 3, it's going to be few and far between the chances that we get.
We are live on LAFC YouTube and LAFC Facebook. Drop your comments or your questions. We're going to shift focus and begin our preview of the CONCACAF Champions League second leg against Inter Miami. LAFC leads at 1-0 on aggregate. We're going to give our projected 11 in a moment, and you said something that I'm going to plug into. I don't know if it's going to surprise you, but I'm going to give you just some thoughts about how they line up that may be a little different. Quickly, Jonathan 18, 42 originals. Thanks for joining us. 42 originals, one of our supporters group who got a lot of FaceTime in the stadium against Inter Miami last week on that magic day. I saw your scarves everywhere. I'll leave it at that. Very nice stuff. William Zarate. What about this one, Benny? Who would you guys say is our captain, like the one who sticks his chest out when things go wrong, the one who in games makes those tackles and defends the colors? I think last year we knew it was Ilie Sanchez. Our captain is Aaron Long. I thought he was I thought Aaron in that first leg was that guy. Maybe it's Eddie Segura. What do you think?
I would say I never make goalies captains, right? But I actually like Hugo Lloris, the ability for him to talk back there and kind of conduct. But again, I don't put a goalie as a captain because he's not on the field and he has a very hard time communicating from the back. I think Aaron Long is a fantastic option. There's probably a couple others that you could say, and I don't know what their locker room presence is. I think Mark Delgado is a fantastic presence in there. I know Igor Jesus just got there, so he's not going to be a captain, but a guy that you could see growing into that role at some point. I don't know how much English he speaks, right? So all of these things play a part. But I do think that Eddie Segura, I think Aaron Long, I think Igor Jesus, and I think Mark Delgado are all guys that could, act in that role.
Jesse says we need Benny back in the midfield. You got that lactic acid back, no?
And maybe in the over 40 league. You got to do an LAFC over 40 league. I'll be there first.
You're not 40 yet. You're not 40.
I'm 40. What do you mean I'm not 40? I'm born in 85.
Yeah. 40 over 40 league it is then. Just going back to I wanted to mention this because I thought it was a really good shot, and it goes to show how intelligent our audience is. Listen to this comparison. Ordaz could be a Jordan Morris in the league, non-European, but could be a DB caliber to the right team. And the fact that he can play the 9, which Morris does, and can play out wide as an 11. He's not the physical specimen that Jordan. But what do you think about that?
That's not a terrible comparison. I do think that he's a little bit of a different player, but like you said, domestic, similar position. I do think that Ordaz has the ability to, whether he becomes a DP. I think it's almost like the same thing that I talk about with my kids. You don't know. How quickly these kids will develop and what they're going to look like in 5-10 years. And same thing with Ordaz. I think he's got, a lot of talent, a lot of quality. We've seen him improve in leaps and bounds over the last 12 months. Does that continue? Does that stagnate? But I do think he's got tons of potential to be a very, very good player in this league.
No doubt. Cengiz Under will be back into the 11. Yabi Castillo saying, I feel like Under's still not doing what Oliveira would produce for us. Big difference is Bouanga not scoring. I think we forget about Oliveira. And granted, he just never clicked into place, but that guy could get vertical. He was fast. He's a lot faster than Under. Obviously, we've talked about Matty Bogusz as well, but it's different. And I don't think, Under brings a lot of things that Oliveira could not do. But I saw some things in the first leg where he's trying to work in the middle. He would come across. And I wonder if that's an option where from one wing to the other and just bring it back in, kind of like what Carlos Vela did.
Right. Look, the one thing, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about something very similar. And my guess to the team that's going to start in this game is probably going to be Denny Bouanga on the left, Ordaz on the right, and Under Ordaz in the middle, Under on the right. And within that, who's LAFC's best attacking right back? That's Hollingshead. And I know he plays on the left, and I guarantee he's going to play on the left, and Palencia is going to play on the right, especially with a 1-0 lead. Palencia is arguably our best, one-on-one defender. I mean, he's an animal defensively, but he just doesn't get up and down as much as Hollingshead. And I'm curious if Steve will start thinking about that, because Under is a guy that you could utilize the overlapping outside back. It almost would be better if Palencia was left-footed and he could play on the left side, more of the defensive aspect, with Bouanga letting him kind of go on his own. And then Under, who requires a player to kind of go around him so that he has the ability to either, get the overlapping pass in or cut inside and utilize that decoy run to get it on his left foot. That would be extremely interesting to see if we get to that point. But that's something that, would be I'd be very curious to see what that would look like.
We'll give the rest of our projected 11, but some details about this game. It is at 5 p.m. Pacific time, so much earlier than the game in the first leg. You can see it on FS1 and TUDN. It's going to the big network in Spanish, and of course,
in Espanol.
See, and that's a big broadcast for TUDN. So tune in. Maybe you're going to Miami. I kicked the tires, but I was just in Miami. I stayed with my mom. She wants me to go back. I just can't. Too much time in an airplane. We'll leave it at that. I'll be at home. Maybe I'll be one of the at our bar partners watching it, enjoying it like we do. So we're talking about the preview because Javier Mascherano, the coach, said some interesting things. One thing we will talk about, and I saw it here in the questions, Gomez, will Miami suffer without Busquets? He is suspended. So he played yesterday in a 1-1 tie with Toronto, and Miami didn't look as good as they did earlier in the season. They haven't looked as good earlier in the season the last few weeks. He was asked about playing the big guys. Suarez started. Messi played the 90 minutes. And I think there was Lujan who started.
Alba
played. So that's interesting. And to maybe Messi, he said he wanted to get him in the rhythm because he's missed a lot of games. What do you think about that? Now, Busquets, first your thoughts about no Busquets, and also Messi, the difference between getting him some run or maybe killing his legs a little bit for a game, because remember, only 2 days between their Toronto game and the LAFC game.
Busquets, first of all, I think is a big loss for Miami. They're down, right? They're down a goal right now. They need to create. And I think Busquets is a guy that has a very, very good connection with Messi. He finds moments to get him the ball that other guys don't necessarily see, whether it's in behind, whether it's underneath. I mean, he's looking for him 24/7, and he has a knack for finding him in good spots. So I do think that that's a big miss for Inter Miami. And, my guess is Redondo will play in there, who's a similar player to Busquets, but just doesn't have the exact same chemistry with the attacking players on that team. So we'll see how that looks like. I think that's a positive for LAFC. But again, I go back to the talking points of these guys having played games. I don't know how much it affects them, really. I think that Messi and Suarez, as much as, they play so much and they've played so much in their careers, they know their bodies better than anybody. I think they probably, if you look at their numbers, they probably don't run nearly as much as some of the other guys. I thought Messi actually didn't look his best, which is saying something, right? He's so consistent. He looked like he was rushing some plays at times. I saw a couple of shots from outside the box where I was certain he was going to try and chop someone to get closer to the goal. So it looked like he was a little bit not 100% Messi. And, maybe playing him 90 minutes was the best decision in terms of Miami's standpoint to get him kind of going. Again, it's going to have to be a perfect game from LAFC. I really believe that, for them to come in and get a result on the road. But I do think that they have the ability to do it, and they're probably getting an Inter Miami at a pretty good time, if there's ever a good time to play them.
I think it is a good time, and it's a gamble for Messi. He needed those 90 minutes. But it's a gamble. Let me ask you this, Benny. What would you prefer? Would you prefer to be in Miami shoes? You play Sunday, 2 days off, but you stay at home, or LAFC shoes where you get 3 days in between, but you're traveling? And take out the fact I'd like to stay in my bed and your creature comforts. But even if you're traveling, does that extra day help your body more? Or
from a rest standpoint, the 3 days is more important. The 3 days is more important. Now, when you take
even if you're traveling,
Even if you're traveling, I think, because the way that the teams travel nowadays, it's not like you're in Southwest, middle seat, 2 legs, all that kind of stuff. You're chartering. You can put your legs up. You can sleep. You're pretty comfortable, right? And so I do think that it is beneficial to have that extra 24 hours to rest. Now, having said all that, you take everything else into consideration other than the 1-0 lead, because I'd rather take a 1-0 lead than be playing from behind. But they're playing at home. 2 games, right? They're playing the second game now of an aggregate at home in front of their fans. And so this game is going to be, I think at the end, it almost all is going to even out because of how it's set up. They're playing at home. They're only on 2 days rest instead of LAFC with 3, but LAFC is coming from already an away game to another away game. And so, all in all, I think it's going to even themselves out. And at the end of the day, you're going to have to perform in those 90 minutes to see who deserves to go through.
Sounds like Benny's picking LAFC. That's what I thought. Very good. Projected lineup for Miami. Sir Crispy, by the way, hello, Mr. Bretos and Mr. Feilhaber. Very formal. He also asked, sounds like a law firm, Bretos and Feilhaber. He also goes, I hope we don't park the bus on Wednesday like we did on the second game with Columbus. But let me ask you this. Do you think there's any temptation that we see a 3-4-3? And I just felt like there's some Easter eggs there with Tafari play. Maybe you go with the 3 center backs and Hollingshead, Palencia, and then you have the 2 midfielders. Is that crazy?
No one's suspended, right? No one's suspended for our group.
Suspended. No,
I don't think we see
it. Suspended. He served his
Igor. Right. Igor. Yeah. I don't see a 3-4-3. I understand where you're coming from with that. I just think that we've seen the best games coming from a 4-3-3, and I just don't think you break that midfield up. That's the biggest thing. You're going to want to play with Timothy Tillman, Igor Jesus, and Mark Delgado. So if you do that, you're not playing a 3-4-3 unless you want to play a 3-5-2, which I don't think makes sense either. So I think we're going to see the 4-3-3. In terms of the comment that we don't want to see us park the bus against like we did in the second game against Columbus. Again, I go back to that game, and I know that game was a 3-0 lead, so it's night and day, right? It's different comparison. But in that game, in the first 5 minutes of the game, before we gave up the 1 goal, we had an excellent chance to make it 1-0 in that game. And I would want to play in a very compact, not low block where you park the bus and you're hoping for a 1-0 win. You're sitting and you have a definitive idea of how you want to attack the space and get another goal. And another goal is huge. You do not want to play this game as a 0-0 draw because another goal makes them have to score 3. And so I doubt that Steve Trundle is thinking about a 0-0 draw at this point. But how can we be protective of our goal and still find a way to be dangerous and get that 1 away goal, which I think will be extremely key in this game.
If this game looks like Columbus, I got some good news for you. The second leg in Columbus. Having not conceded an away goal, LAFC, let's say they drop behind a goal and maybe a second goal. LAFC score an away goal, which they did in Columbus. If they score an away goal, Miami would have to score 3. So if Miami wins 2-1, LAFC is going through. So I think you don't want them to concede, but there's no reason for panic. If they score 2 goals, you just still need 1 goal. So I tend to think your lineup prediction is right. You don't want to go in there and say, hey, we have a little bit of cover here. But they do. And I think that may allow them to kind of be a little closer to what they would normally do.
I just don't think you go in there with the idea of a shutout. That's not right. How many? I'd like to know the stats. You're the stats guy, Max. How many times has a Messi-led team in Miami been shut out at home? My guess is almost 0. Right. So you got to try.
And the shutout in the first leg was so huge in my estimation. Huge.
Correct.
Once Bouanga gets one behind the net, I think the front flips will be consistent. The away rule, which I hate, comes in handy in this match. Yes, it does. We get 1. No extra time unless Inter Miami wins it 1-0. So let's talk about your projected lineup. You said Under on the right, Ordaz, and Bouanga. How does the goalie? Let's go goalie, defenders.
Yeah, and I think we'll see obviously Lloris in goal. We'll see Palencia on the right. We'll see Hollingshead on the left, and we'll see Aaron Long and Eddie Segura is my guess. I mean, the only question mark would be Eddie, but I don't know how he feels after this game and whatnot. Obviously, Marlon was coming back from an injury, and he was subbed out, if I'm not mistaken, in this last game with some odd minutes to go, maybe 30 or so. So, in theory, he played well enough where I wouldn't mind starting him if Eddie is a little bit, more tired, exhausted, or whatever. But yeah, I think that's the one that's the only position that I'm a little bit curious about. I would guess it's Eddie Segura.
And the midfield, Tillman, Delgado, Igor Jesus. So no surprises.
That to me is like the biggest no-brainer. I don't think that there's going to be any doubt in those three.
Well, and this gets back to how we started the show, is that we need 14, 15 options total. So it's not so no-brainer. So that we have a fourth midfielder competing for playing time.
We would hope it's not as no-brainer is what you're saying.
Right, exactly. But I think on the bright spot, if we look at Houston, and wouldn't be surprised if Marlon does start. And that's progress, right? A guy goes, all right, he can compete. Eddie's put a lot of tread on the tires. Let's start Marlon. So that's something.
I agree. No, that was the biggest, positive takeaway. And look, I know that we're talking about the projected lineup, and obviously this game becomes pivotal in not only obviously the CCC, but just the season as a whole. And to me, I've played in this league for a long period of time. I know how the CCC works from a mental standpoint on a lot of teams. You see kind of like hangovers when teams, bow out of the CCC. You also see hangovers from teams that go all the way and potentially win the CCC. So I find this week to be incredibly pivotal in what the season's going to look like, not in terms of, how likely we are to win MLS Cup and whatnot, but obviously, if we get through Miami, we have an incredible chance to compete for a CCC title, right? We would be possibly the only MLS team, maybe one of two if Vancouver can pull it off against Pumas. But you're going against the Giants in Mexico, probably. I think Tigres is going to knock off the LA Galaxy, and then there's
Cruz School.
Right, and so it's going to be a fascinating semifinal if we're able to get there. And then I think that the game against San Jose at home becomes crucial. And I think it becomes crucial for many reasons. One, what are the players that are going to play in that game, right, after whatever happens on Tuesday night? And can they look a little bit more – I would say that I'm a little bit less interested in the result, although I think the result is very important since, we're 3-4 right now in the league. But I want to see the performance from a couple of different players, right? And I want to see them have some more chemistry. And so this week for me is so pivotal in what we're going to see LAFC look like in terms of competing for the top of the West, competing for the CCC title. Very, very important week. And I think it all has to, run almost perfectly and very smooth for us to feel good about, what the next couple months are going to look like.
So from what I understand, we've had 12 games, and LAFC hasn't tied a game, by the way, in any one, I don't think. So you're saying we're deep enough here that this is what LAFC is going to look like. Maybe they change things in the summer, but we've got enough sample size that they've got to start figuring it out in a pivotal week in these two games. And it's nice at San Jose at home to show the real LAFC.
I would say, and I want to make sure I don't oversell what I'm trying to say. Obviously, CCC is of huge importance, right? You win that game, you put yourself in a very, very promising position to win arguably one of or the most important championship that you can, right? The regional championship. And I also believe that because, hopefully we get through this, you're going to have to find some players, depth, 15, 16 guys that you can truly count on if you want to be one of the top 4 or 5 in the Western Conference. If we can't find 14, 15, 16 guys that we can truly count on in these games while we're competing in CCC, I think that we're going to be more hoping for the 6, 7, 8 seeds. And then, in the playoffs, hopefully you get on a run, whatnot. But I think this week is pivotal in what we're going to end up seeing be kind of our ambition throughout the season.
Excellent place to leave it off. A question was asked. If you have something, we're getting in quick because we're gonna call it a day here. We'll be back again next Monday. You know where to be. Tell your friends to join us live on YouTube and on Facebook. Would the final of CCC be before the Club World Cup? If so, it can potentially be LAFC versus America. The final of the CONCACAF Champions Cup is June 1st, so it is before the Club World Cup. Maybe that, who knows? And we don't know anything about the Club World Cup qualifying. That is just, nothing is confirmed yet. So we don't know. Whatever you're reading, nothing has been confirmed as of yet. Here we go. Henry coming in. Your goal prediction for the Miami game. I got one. I feel good about it.
Go for it.
Miami wins it 2-1. LAFC advances.
All right. I got a 1-1 tie.
That's even better.
Yeah, it is better. We got a
Even
1-1
better.
tie. I'm hoping we get the one goal first so we don't have to sweat it out, but I think it's a 1-1 draw.
Well, if it's based on how the real LAFC is standing up, if they get an early goal, then we're in good shape. Don't forget, LAFC is back at BMO Stadium Saturday, 7:30 Eastern time. Come out and see what all the magic's about. It. We saw it in Miami. Let's make it good. Sir Crispy, I hope you have a great rest of your days. What? Sir Crispy, let's go LAFC. I think he meant just this week. Yeah, here we go. Good merchandise. Come out to the stadium, BMO Stadium. Good to see you, Benny. Sorry about the Open Cup, but I know it's good that you had that last run.
Don't be sorry. It was fun while it lasted.
We will join you again on Inside LAFC podcast next Monday, same time. For Benny, I'm Max. Until then, let's go Black and Gold.